The next speaker is an American attorney, author, politician, and political commentator on CNN. He served as United States Senator of Pennsylvania from 1995 to 2007. It is my honor to introduce Senator Rick Santorum.
Thank you very much. Good to see everybody here today. It's a pleasure to be in front of a friendly audience instead of Chris Cuomo or somebody else over at CNN. But look, someone has to do it. Someone has to do it. Someone has to be out there to defend the president and go out and speak the truth to the rest of the country. So I look at that as, I get hazard pay when I go to work at CNN every day. But I do enjoy it. I really do. I like the battle. I like going out there and correcting the record and giving an opportunity to speak. You know, one of the problems we have in our country is that we're becoming, because of technology, we're becoming increasingly siloed. We just listen to people who agree with us. If you look at, obviously probably a lot of Fox News watchers here, which is great, but the reality is we talk to ourselves. And we don't have an opportunity as much to reach out and talk to others. So actually one of the reasons I decided to go and work with CNN was to do that, was to have the opportunity to go out and speak to people who I know don't agree with me. And I know that because every time I get off the air, Twitter explodes and everybody's mad at me. But that's okay. At least they're hearing the other arguments. I think that's one of the challenges for your generation because of technology is to be able to go out and speak to others who disagree with you and do it in a civil way. And that's a challenge, but it's something that has to be done. And because, we really risk the beauty of America if we continue this great division. Anybody know the motto of the United States? E pluribus unum. Everybody likes to talk about, the left in particular, loves to talk about diversity. And diversity is great. I mean, I'm not against diversity. But diversity is not a virtue. It's a natural state. We're all different. We may be different for different reasons. The left tends to focus on gender and ethnicity and race, but we're different. Everybody's different. We're all diverse. The question is, right? It's not hard to be diverse. It's not hard to be divided. There's lots of easy things. I mean, look at just your own family. It's easy to find faults with people. What's hard is to find a common sense, a consensus. That's why this motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. America stood for something. America isn't just, everybody doing whatever they want to do. There was a common understanding and goal, and we were involved in an enterprise. And one of the big problems I think we see in America today is we've lost that sense of enterprise. We've lost that sense of mission. Believe it or not, I know this is hard because you're young and you obviously don't have a real keen grasp of the last 40 or 50 years. I lived those years. And I think we've gone from a time when there was a general consensus of what America was and what its future should be. We had a certain sets of values and norms that we all sort of agreed to. Left, right even, generally agreed to. That's not the case anymore. You live in a very different time. And it's a really challenging time. And so I have a lot of hope. I mean, I pay a little attention to looking at the generations and look at the baby boomers and the Gen Xers and the millennials, and now you guys are Gen Zs. I have a lot of hope for Gen Z. Coming out of the millennial generation to be sort of a countercultural generation that actually can help us try to find that national consensus again. And that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen without your voice. So one of the reasons I jumped at the opportunity to come here today was to speak to you, to encourage you, because I think there's an opportunity in your generation. There's a real opportunity for this generation to chart a different course than where the millennials are taking us. And they're taking us into the abyss, candidly. But I think your generation can be the counterculture generation. And let me just, for 1 second, focus on culture, then I'll open it up for questions. The big issue that's missing in, I think, the broader discussion that we have as conservatives is the impact of the culture on all of this. And I wrote a book a long time ago, 2005, called It Takes a Family. And I wrote it in response to a book, her most famous book, believe it or not, Hillary Clinton's. Knew that would get a reaction. I wrote it in response to a book she wrote when she was First Lady called It Takes a Village. And it really was the template for government coming in and sort of moving the family aside, destroying the elements of the culture that were based on family and replacing it with a culture that's based more on reliance on government, the village. And I said, no, if we move to that, we're going to end up where, well, the socialist countries have ended up and now where Europe is ending up, which is a country that looks not to yourself and to your family first and to your church and your community, but looks first to the government for them to be the provider. And candidly and unfortunately, that's what's happened over the past 30, 40 years, is we've seen this gradual erosion of the basic building block of society, which is the family. And in the millennial generation, we're looking at only about 70% of millennials are going to ever get married. That's the lowest level of any generation. In fact, far lower. Over half of millennials say that raising a family and having children isn't important. It's not one of the most important things in their lives. So we've seen some really huge shifts in what people want in their lives and what they value in their lives based on a narrative that says marriage and families and children are a burden and a hassle, and it's all about you, it's all about stuff, it's all about experiences, it's all about making you happy by getting things. And what I'm hopeful this generation, the counterculture generation to the millennials, will push back and say, no, if we learned anything throughout human history, happiness doesn't come from getting things. Happiness comes from the satisfaction of serving and giving to others in a self and sacrificial way. Now those are great platitudes to say, but I can tell you as someone who got married relatively late. I mean, I was 32 when I got married. And by the way, the average age of people getting married now is 30 for men. And by the way, that was 22 50 years ago. So just to give you an idea how we're waiting later and in many cases not getting married. But those platitudes that you applaud to are great, but they don't really come into practice in a real way, in a constant way, until number one, you get married, and number two, you have children. Because once you get married and once you have children, your life isn't yours anymore. You live your life for somebody else. That's where the real understanding of sacrificial love and an understanding of the joy of giving really comes into play. And when we delay that or don't do that at all, when we discount marriage and we discount children and we discount the idea of being a father, over half of your generation is going to be raised without a father in the home. When we discount that, we take that generation of men who aren't parenting children, who aren't married, and by and large, that is the lowest rates of marriage and the lowest rates of fatherhood are what socioeconomic group? The bottom half. We're dooming younger, poorer people in America to a difficult life and a life without the understanding and knowledge of what sacrificial love is and the joy of giving of self. That is where true happiness comes from. And so I just share that with you because it's probably not, you're not going to hear that from any other speaker today, and I just felt like, or yesterday or tomorrow, and I just felt like that's a message that with all of the politics and issues that you're going to be discussing, it's not really discussed up here in Washington. They don't really talk much about this because it's hard to talk about. because it sometimes offends people, makes people uncomfortable. You know, you're criticizing single moms, you're criticizing dads. I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm trying to raise our eyes up a little bit. And particularly in your generation, don't settle for a life that's empty, with just stuff focused on how I make myself happy. In the end, that's a really empty life. And I just want to encourage you, because I do believe that because you are the next generation after this millennial group, that you can be the countercultural group, not just on the issues that Turning Point focuses on, which are terrific, on capitalism and on the Second Amendment, all these things which, again, are very hot button issues today. But to me, there's nothing more important than this foundational issue of who you are in this world, and whether that is a person who's focused inwardly or outwardly. Okay.